Good day. My name is Francesca Conradie, and I'm a South African-born and trained medical doctor. I've been actively involved in clinical research into better treatment and prevention for both TB and HIV for the better part of the last 20 years. Most of my work has been based in South Africa, but I have assisted in community engagement in some other sub-Saharan African countries. Through these experiences, I've seen the awareness of the need for community engagement grow, and it is my plan to share why community engagement is needed for research to succeed, as well as the ethical necessity for community engagement. I'm a USAID grant holder. Following this lecture, I would expect you to be able to describe the ethical imperatives for community engagement as a researcher. I want you to know what the limitations of community engagement are and what it can and cannot achieve. I want you to recognize the myth-busting potential of community engagement. Ethical imperatives. Let's go back to basics. There are 4 pillars of medical ethics. The 2 on the right-hand side, beneficence and non-maleficence, really have to do with the design of studies. We have to look at the risk-benefit ratio when designing protocols. This is closely reviewed by ethics committees or IRBs prior to the approval of our protocols. The rationale for the design should be clearly explained to both the ethics committees and the communities where the research is going to be conducted. Important pitfalls to avoid are the use of medical jargon or terms. Let me give you some examples. We know significance as a statistical term with a p-value, but it's used more loosely in common language. How do you think you would explain the concept of non-inferiority? What it really means is that the intervention is no worse than what we currently have. But I want to discuss in more detail the 2 on the left-hand side, justice and autonomy. Let's talk about distributive justice and how this fits into community engagement. I'm going to focus quite a bit on this area, and it is vital to the conduct of good research. So what is it? I always like to start with a definition. Distributive justice is the perceived fairness of how rewards and costs or risks are shared by or distributed across the group members. Please notice that I stress the word perceived. We have to be sure that as researchers, we do not appear just to be taking, but that the community that we are serving benefits both in the short term and in the long term. I think the term mosquito or helicopter research encapsulates the feelings of many community members. We swoop in, often with foreign funding, and take information and data, blood, sputum, and then leave. How can we prevent this perception? First of all, we need to define what the group is. Who are our group members? And in this case, it refers directly to the people who live in the area where the research is going to be conducted. There are other stakeholders too, for example, the National TB Program, policymakers, drug manufacturers, but I don't have time to address all of these. Is it likely that the intervention that you are studying, if successful, will be available to the community that you're serving? I'm going to give a hypothetical example here. Say you wanted to develop a monoclonal antibody for post-TB lung disease, and that this will retail in the United States for $10,000 US. Let's face it, that is beyond the affordability for the vast majority of people in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. This needs to be considered. Let's talk about regulatory approval. Regulatory approval by the Food and Drug Administration is one thing, but countries have their own regulators. I can only speak from South African experience, but if a drug is to be registered by the South African Health Authority, then there needs to be a local presence in the country. And what this basically means is to submit a dossier. You need to have an office in the country. Please consider this before you begin research. What about adoption in the country guidelines? As this is a talk about TB, almost all TB treatment is given by the national TB programs. Are they aware of what your research plans are? And is it likely to be adopted by the national TB program? We talk also about post-trial access. Most TB treatment is short-term, lasting for 6 to 18 months. However, will there be post-trial access for members of family and contacts of the people that you enrolled on clinical trials? Please bear this in mind as you embark on clinical research and talk to the communities that you're serving. The respect for individual autonomy. Individual autonomy is mandatory for research, and this refers to an individual providing informed consent, and this can never be waived if you're conducting ethical research. However, different communities have different approaches. As you embark on research, what you need to understand is, what are the other players in individual autonomy? What role does the family play? I'm surprised that frequently family members are consulted when a participant is thinking of embarking on clinical research, but it needs to be considered. Do the community elders play a role? And they should definitely be approached before research is conducted in a community if that's appropriate. And finally, because it can be an issue in South Africa, what role does gender inequality play? I am not saying that individual autonomy should ever be circumvented. However, community engagement helps us as researchers to understand what the common practices are. I can't cover every single aspect of community engagement in this short talk, but what I want to do now is to move on to more practical steps. This is not the only way, but I do have some suggestions on how to set up a community advisory board. What we have done is we've appointed a community liaison officer. This, of course, has an intrinsic conflict of interest because the community liaison officer is funded by the researchers. It is seldom that we can find an individual who has the time or the resources to dedicate to setting up and maintaining a community advisory board, to function as a secretariat. Usually, we've appointed a social worker and a counselor or a counselor to this position. Who can we consider as potential members for our community advisory boards? You need to know who the community leaders are, and these can be political appointees, they can be the community elders or religious leaders, and they should be invited to participate in the community advisory board. I find that frequently healthcare providers in the area under study are very interested in participating in community advisory boards. They want to know what's on the horizon and also want their challenges to be explained to the researchers. Often members of community advisory boards are people who've been affected or infected by the condition under study and their families. And then, of course, community advisory boards should be open to anyone in the area who's interested in the disease under study. It is very important that the PI and other investigators attend key meetings. These can include the founding meetings of the Community Advisory Board, when a new protocol is about to start, talking about new protocol ideas and initiation of protocols. This lends authenticity to community advisory boards. So let's now talk about what the strengths and limitations of community advisory boards are and what community engagement can and cannot do. What can community engagement achieve? If you have a well-functioning community advisory board, what we can do is create awareness of the condition under study. For example, explain what rifampicin-resistant TB is and why it's important, how HIV can be prevented, and in light of the recent COVID pandemic talk about vaccines within the community. Increased research literacy amongst community advisory board members helps people to understand the regulatory and ethical oversight that's involved. It helps them to understand what informed consent is and how it is obtained. Then, talking in research literacy terms, what is randomization? Why is it done? What is a risk-benefit ratio? And when and if placebos can be used? It is important to have people who understand research literacy to be involved in community advisory boards to help with ongoing progress. What community engagement can achieve? A well-functioning and established community advisory board can give input at the design stage of a protocol. They can, if they're well aware of the issues, they can offer practical advice. In addition, I really like our community advisory board to review any informed consents to make sure that the language makes sense. Community advisory boards can give assistance in recruitment plans. They can provide ongoing community awareness. And then when the study is finished, the most fun of all is that the community and advisory boards can be involved in dissemination of the results. But what can community engagement not achieve? In the areas that I'm conducting research presently, there are many social determinants of health. Food insecurity, unfortunately, is high on the list of what is troubling our potential participants. Overcrowding leads to acquisition of TB. There is gender-based violence. And in addition, unfortunately, substance abuse is rife. A community and advisory board cannot solve these social determinants of health. But what they can become is a voice of what the resources are available in the communities that research is being conducted in. For example, where do you get help for substance abuse? How can gender-based violence be reported? What are the myths in clinical research? As mentioned before, I've been involved in clinical research for the last 20 years, and I've seen many myths. I don't have time to go through all of them, and I just want to pick up some key ones. The first one is that research exploits less resourced communities to benefit more resourced communities. We need to explain that while foreign funding is being used, the idea of conducting research is to improve the treatment of whatever condition it is in the area that you are working. The term guinea pig is one that I really hate. It refers to the use of untested medication without people's adequate consent. And we can explain why this is not occurring in our research protocols and what governs our research protocols. In addition, if placebos are going to be given, we need to explain why they are being given and that no treatable medical condition will be treated with a placebo in ethical research. And we need to debunk the myth that it is not only researchers that benefit from research, but is in fact the whole community, and that the communities take risks too. Thank you very much for attending this talk, and I hope that it was useful.